Hello.
Hello there, Jen.
Hi. And hello to our audience. So happy to have everyone here. I
Hi,
am
everyone.
still grabbing the link for the event. So if you could just bear with me for a second before we get started. I know I do this countdown like I'm ready, but I'm not ready. Sorry.
We are almost there.
Almost there. So close. I think what I need to do is probably make that intro longer.
I was jamming to the music.
Man, and that was a hard choice, which music to pick.
That's the other challenge, but I liked it. I was like getting excited.
So we've got Meg already joined us. Excited for this topic. Me too. This is one of those topics that comes up for me a lot. As an assertive woman, right?
That's key.
So anyone joining us would love to know where everyone is coming from. I love to see the variety of the audience that we get over here on LinkedIn Live. Appreciate everyone who decides to join us. And also would love to know if you're team live or team replay. I tend to notice so many more people coming in after we go live, days, even weeks after that, that the videos still gain a lot of traction. That's one of the most interesting things about this LinkedIn Live experience is how many people come in later to actually watch them. I think that's just amazing. So we've got David here from Half Moon Bay.
Oh.
We have Janet from Michigan. Jonathan, he's live. He might be in Massachusetts or maybe. That's all right. So I'm so excited to have you on with me, Guerlyne. It's amazing. I know we just met like a few weeks ago, but I thought it was such an amazing conversation and happy to have you join me. I wanted to tell everyone about yourself, but additionally, anyone who has any questions they'd like us to talk about, or if you have any insights into this topic, would love for you to share them, and we can also discuss them live. Love just to have people share. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes, certainly. Thank you, firstly, for having me, Jen. So my name is Guerlyne. I have been in sales for the last 5 years, started in business development for a manufacturing company, and now I'm working in tech for a software company. We are chat-based software. So I'm an account manager there, which means I am upselling and cross-selling our existing customer base, which is wonderful. And I'm happy to be connected with you and everything that you've been doing here for women in sales. I'm just happy to be on board.
Well, and we're pleased to have you. So you've got a story to share about your experience with the topic of assertive versus aggressive. So why don't you share that? I know I've got a story to share as well. And again, anyone who would like to share any insights, please in the chat, feel free to do so. We can talk about it.
Yeah. So for me, I would say early on in my sales career, I had an instance where someone had said to me, this is a male counterpart. He said to me that I was not being aggressive enough, and he was questioning how aggressive I am. And it was the manner in which it was done, because it happened to be over some channels that is mutually shared within our team. So it was, in a sense, public, and I was tagged, and this person was like, I'm not sure how aggressive they're being. And they were not necessarily a manager. They're someone who's just a counterpart, but this was, again, their perception and what they said. When I brought this up to my management at the time, I said, well, do you think this is the case? Do you think this is true? Am I not being aggressive enough? And from my management, unfortunately, I got neither here nor there from them. They just were like, well, yeah, don't worry about that. We're just going to keep looking at this deal and da 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 da. And in that occasion, I wasn't necessarily defended, but I also wasn't exactly coached through, and it wasn't made into a constructive comment either. So for me, in that experience and over that particular opportunity, when I asked this person, because I asked them later, or someone who had to work together a lot, I asked them and said, hey, what was up with this? Why don't you think I'm being aggressive enough, or whatever have you? And they're like, oh, I've just seen other reps that have done this, and usually they would get this meeting sooner, or X, Y, and Z. But essentially, from this counterpart, it was unfounded. They really had no validation to give me for this comment. Equally, they are not someone who was in a sales role either. So I say that to say, which we'll completely get into, there's a couple variables there as far as where the comment is coming from, who it's coming from. It happened to both be males. And there was just no constructive criticism to the comment, or feedback, if you will. It was just a comment that was made with no justification. And for me, for that particular opportunity, there was no need to be aggressive, and there was nothing to be aggressive about in that instance. The background to that is that essentially for that opportunity, it was a timing issue. It was not the right time. There was no budget. The deal went through later on, but it was not going to happen in that time period, which was something I already found in the discovery session. So that is what happened in a very brief nutshell.
I can relate to that. I had, as a contributor, I had lost accounts for what they perceived as not aggressive enough, when in a similar case, I was just really listening, right? And trying to understand where they were in their buyer's journey. It's not like when another person was put on the account, they moved any faster. They did not.
Right.
But there's a perception, it's that unconscious bias that as women, that sometimes they look at us in sales and say, you're not aggressive enough, right? On the flip side, as a leader, I've also experienced that being told that I was too aggressive, that I was aggressive when I perceived I was being assertive, right? So, it's like, as a contributor, people will come up with certain labels, right, that they'll put on you.
Right.
And as a leader, they'll also put labels on you. And whether those labels are actually based on any fact or not is entirely another matter. So how did that make you feel when that happened to you?
Yeah, again, this was early on for me in my career in sales. So admittedly, I felt really, I felt embarrassed. That was my first feeling, because it wasn't that it was said to me directly. It was kind of public within our team, and it wasn't addressed with me. So I just was embarrassed first, and I felt super inadequate after, even though there was no basis to it. But initially, I definitely felt inadequate. Like, oh my, like, am I not doing enough here? What else could I do? How else could that work? And for me, that kind of put me into a bit of a spin of trying to be something I'm not, which is why, I was saying, let's call this Don't Take It On, because I started to run with a perception of aggression in these opportunities, and it did not fit. It was like the wrong size shoe. It did not fit.
Because you have to be yourself. And if you're not being yourself, you're not being authentic. And as we all know, women generally, excel at sales. There are studies out there. We make quota, 8% of the time more than you. And so, not that men are bad. They're great.
Right.
It's just that we bring a unique skill set with our authentic communication. And there is value in that. And it's not necessarily an aggressive approach. It's assertive.
Yeah.
And where does the line between aggressive and assertive lie?
Right.
Assertive is really, that being clear and taking into account that other person's point of view, and being concise in our language, and being thoughtful about our communication. Aggressive, by definition, is something very different. How do you perceive assertive versus aggressive for you? What does it mean to you?
So for me, I echo much of your sentiment there. Being assertive, you have that laced with clarity, at least. There's clarity, there's an exchange, there's some respect there. With aggression, it's almost a disregard for people. And I think as we put that into sales and the sales process, and also the common analogy with sports here too, is that in sports, aggression is praised. You being aggressive makes you excel in sports. I used to be an athlete. The more aggressive you are, I used to play soccer. It's wonderful. Slide tackle this person, you're doing great. In the sales sense, like, why would I need to take out my customer? Who am I being aggressive towards right now? Where is this being directed to? And it's actually the antithesis of the outcome you need, which is I need to partner with my customer. I need to walk alongside them in this journey. And especially from an account management, existing client base sense, I'm really working as a subject matter expert and a consult with them, which means there's going to be some nurturing in this relationship, which means I can't come and just take over here. So I definitely, if I would replace terms here, instead of aggressive, do you mean persistent, tenacious maybe? I can do those things. I can keep reaching out. I can keep following through, but aggressive, that might be transgressing some boundaries there.
Yeah, Catalyst did a campaign that I love that was all about the bias correct, right? That, when there's a word that you use for a woman, sometimes that's a different word that you would use for a man.
Yeah.
A man who's a perfectionist, a woman who is bossy, those words that, and the labels people put on us. So when you're confronted with a situation like you were now, since that was early in your career, how do you manage the perceptions?
Now it's completely different because I'm a lot more rooted in who I am authentically than I was there. I believe the differences in the time and just a growth perspective is I was trying to please more then than I am now. So I thought I had to take on that perception, when in reality, now that I've just done my natural growing and understanding how important it is to actually be authentic in your sales process and bringing yourself, I navigate those kinds of perceptions in a sense where it's like water up a duck's back. It's like, okay, well, you could think that it's no problem, but I know I'm still going to be successful being me. And I'm actually more successful being myself. And since I've been more comfortable in that and my style of conversing and going through the sales process, and equally when you're growing in being comfortable with your solution offering, seeing more examples, it directs the level of assertiveness you'll have too.
Yeah, no, 100%. Meg had a comment here that said 100% partnership is key. Love this conversation. Maybe we need to be using different words. That's true. Partnership is, and yeah, using different words is also important. I remember there was one time I had an HR meeting, and the reason for the meeting is because my peer, mind you, I was a leader and my peer was a leader. Were having a difference of opinion on a lot of different topics. I was standing up for my team, right? And what they were responsible for and accountable for, and making sure that the results were happening. And he was standing up for his team, but we were kind of at a crossroads. So I was being assertive in my language, and I was called into HR. And what was funny is that they kept on using the word aggressive. And it really bothered me because, like I had mentioned previously, all throughout my career, I had, when people were perceiving me as not aggressive enough, they were telling me that I wasn't being aggressive. And so now in this particular situation, I'm only being perceived as aggressive when I'm not doing anything that was actually aggressive. And man, the self-analysis in that particular situation was absurd. Because
Mm-hmm.
here I am as a sales leader and I've got an HR department telling me, don't focus on results.
Mm-hmm.
Focus on your relationship with just this one person, even though my entire
Oh,
team is
wow.
accountable for results.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, where's that balance?
Balance.
Where everyone has their own perception and that your perception is just
Mm-hmm.
as valid. And when you get
Right.
feedback like this, and I love why this is called Don't Take That On. What
Mm-hmm.
is true? What is right? And
Yeah.
how do you do that self analysis to know what to take in and what to just say, you're wrong. You're just,
Right.
you're not, you're not seeing this accurately, or
Mm-hmm.
you have a vision of this that doesn't align with the way I see it, and
Right.
it's not valid.
Right.
Um,
Right. There's no validity to it.
exactly.
Mhm.
So Catherine's got some comments here. She's got a lot of comments. It's an interesting distinction. Being aggressive is doing what's in your own best interest without the regard for rights, wants, or needs of others. Being
Mhm.
assertive, on the other hand, is similarly being clear about what you want, being forthright about your needs, and considering the rights, wants, and needs of others. And that
Yeah.
that is a really good distinction, and that's how I perceived it, even in that
Yep.
particular scenario. If I'm
Mhm.
standing up for other people and I'm being assertive to stand up for other people, I
Mhm.
don't care about the other perceptions, but I like, where do you like drawing that line between what you're going to take and what you're going to
Yep.
leave behind. So I
Right.
think that's why I loved the title of this particular
Right.
episode. So
Yeah.
let's see, we've got another question. What was it, HR or the male team leader throwing out that word? It was HR. Ironically enough, it was based on one person's input, and they hadn't actually talked to my direct supervisor at the time at all before having this meeting. So
Oh, wow.
that
And
was
I did,
their bad.
yeah, I did want to add too, as
Yeah.
far as when you're making these delineations, and maybe if you are in a situation, for some of the ladies who might be in the situation in the future, I think one of the best things we can do is to actually probe and ask some questions behind where the comment's coming from. Because sometimes your management is not versed in delivery, and that's fair.
Mhm.
And we all have areas we need to grow in. But
Yeah.
I think it's completely fair on your part to ask, okay, sure. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by being more aggressive? What would that look like alternatively? What could I do differently? And you're coming from a place of taking feedback, but you're also still in a place of control because you know that that wasn't the right terminology for what you're trying to do. But what you can at least try to extract is, if they can give me something actionable that I can work with, I can at least receive that correction, because maybe I missed something. However, you can't take on an expectation that's just not germane to you as a person.
No, 100%. I think that's a really good point. That curiosity of
Yep.
where it's really coming from and whether you can impact it. Like,
Yep.
is it a perception that they're basing off facts, or is it based on feelings? And what was your genuine intent, and
Mm-hmm.
how would someone else perceive your actions? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's coming from a place of bias or whether it's coming from a place of genuine, this is, this is something that you need to do some self-analysis on, because I mean, nobody's perfect, right?
Of course, no.
And
No.
I'm one of those people can overanalyze something to death.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm inclined to think that someone's reactions are generally, okay, this is how I made them feel,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of, why did they feel that way, and
Right.
how, and and how would I have done it differently? Would I
Right.
have done anything differently? And if I had done anything differently, would they feel a different way? It's like almost
Mm.
planning out that communication. Janet
Right.
said, being assertive is standing up for your own personal rights and expressing your beliefs without violating others' rights. I 100% agree with that. What are
Well
your
said,
thoughts on
Janet. Yeah, I think that's completely well said. I really have been walking into the term being assertive a lot more, because I think it really helps communicate your boundaries in a sense as well. You're letting people know rather clearly where you stand on certain topics and issues, and you're still giving a forum that, hey, we can certainly have a discourse around this, but I'm letting you know this is where I am here. But again, there's clarity laced in there. I'm not being disrespectful. It's a personal issue if you find it disrespectful for me to communicate my stance. That's personal.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if you're taking into another person's, like, this isn't like just a reaction.
Yeah.
The difference between a reaction, taking a minute, collecting yourself, and before speaking, thinking about how it's going to be perceived by the other person and being thoughtful in your communication really makes all the difference in that hurdle. And there are just some cases where no matter how careful you are, that perception, like, you can do self-analysis all day long, but you can't necessarily take that.
Right.
We've got some more comments here. We've got a lot of comments today. Assertive people influence others in a positive way, non-judgmental, and adopt a proactive rather than a reactive approach. So that's basically what I was saying.
Yep.
Let's see. Of course, HR is notorious for cutting emails. They are notorious for cutting emails, but and from their perspective, they had very little interaction with me in that particular case. So they didn't know me at all. So they're taking my peers' perception without asking my supervisor's perception, without taking it more points of view. They were really limited in what they were looking at. So Catherine, yes, ask for more specifics, deeper dive into what the person offering feedback really means and intends. Yeah. And whether they're coming from a place of being like growth, and care, or whether they are coming from a place that's not constructive. Right? Is the feedback that they're giving you constructive, or is it, and then trying to understand it?
Precisely. And it reminds me too of just a common theme in our previous weeks on this show, where you talked about culture fit versus culture add, right? And if you wanted me to fit in to this culture of aggressive style, then okay, maybe we weren't aligned. But if you're truly, expecting me to come in as a culture add to the team, then you'll also respect that I have a different approach to how I go about the sales process. Like, we have sales frameworks that we use. Absolutely, there's process to abide by, but my delivery and execution of those, you can leave that up to interpretation, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think a lot of this goes back to that culture fit versus culture add, where you're looking for whether you're bringing people to the table for what they bring to the table that's unique and different, or whether you were looking for them to fit that mold. And, with how this year is gone and everything going on in the world, that ability to adapt, right, is what everyone is saying is that competitive differentiator. So it's going to be where you add versus where you fit that is going to provide the most value for organizations. And then taking it a step further, creating inclusive environments is where you're going to make sure that the people who are culture adds will stay and help nurture your organization. So Jonathan has some thoughts here. Wordplay and a similar challenge in the theatrical direction. Give me more loving, anger, whatever. What does that mean? Directors, managers need to be better at helping get actors, sellers to specific actions. Be better with instructions so it can be carried out. I would agree with that. Rather than saying you need to be more aggressive, being specific by saying, okay, what's a specific thing you could have done that would have been viewed as more aggressive with a particular account, or more sort of going after it, right?
Right, right. And then it raises the question for management and leadership, as you're kind of delving into their style of coaching, or if there is coaching or what kind of coaching they do. Is it truly strengths based and you're really trying to leverage your individual contributors, the strengths that they offer or what they're adding to your team, and kind of start making more constructive feedback around that? Or are you, I guess this would be the part B subtopic is, or are you putting that on them? So it's, we don't take it on as an individual contributor. So we have to make sure we don't take things on. But if you are in a management role, there's that added responsibility of now you have to examine, what am I putting on my team, or, the people that I'm really responsible for coaching now and improving.
Yeah. And that's really important. I talk a lot about, managing that whole person, right? And so if you manage the whole person, you're taking that person's motivations, what inspires them, what their success looks like for them, what their long-term goals are, how they want to be coached, how they learn. And if you're taking in that whole person, then you're looking at what they bring to the table that's unique, that allows them to succeed. And then you won't have a problem with aggressive versus assertive, because you understand the person at a deeper level.
Yes.
So I think that's pretty interesting. We've got Janet here: bossy or assertive, bubbly or charismatic. The English language uses different words to describe men and women. And that's true. She shares a YouTube video here. Yeah, I highly suggest everyone check out. I shared a link for the catalyst for this campaign that they did for unconscious bias defined. And literally, it gives you the ability to create a picture of yourself for the word that most describes you in that gender-based language, and then shows you the opposite side, the flip side. And, I found this, I looked through it, when it first came out, and I found it so resonated with me in so many different ways. All of the various words people use for women versus men, but even, and sometimes it's not even gender, it's age. Sometimes it's, there are certain words that people will put on you.
Yes.
That not necessarily be, accurate or authentic, or, let's see. Lydia says, I think we all have a tendency to be really examine exchanges and feel like we're being obsessive about what we know in our hearts, and what went down or is going down is not fair and biased. I think we do, especially for people who have heard those phrases that they know to be labels and identify it pretty quick. I try to examine it, and maybe I do over-examine it. Because I over-examine it, I'm more inclined to map out my communication, right? If I have a problem with something, I'm going to literally write down what I'm going to say. What are the possible reactions to it? What can I say it, and what can I say differently that would elicit a different reaction, and compare it with my goal.
Right.
And, most women I speak to who have had some of those problems with those labels do the same thing. And so we're so much more careful about our communication for that reason. I think, it makes me look all that much harder at the places I'm going and the people I communicate with, because it's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah.
To be that careful. I mean, I generally care about people, but if I have to be that careful with my communication, it is exhausting.
No, it is. And then it's also letting you know, okay, what is the culture kind of dictating to me as far as where I have to navigate myself in these conversations? Is that why I have to be so careful? I think in general, you should think before you speak as much as you can.
Yeah.
But if there's a certain culture that's dictating so much caution around that, then that's almost problematic.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I mean, you want to be at a place where your voice is celebrated and your voice has value and
Right.
you can thrive as an individual or a leader, but in either case. And when you have these places that, where labels are part of what goes on there, it makes you be so cautious that you lose some of that authenticity along the way, right? Because you're being
Right.
so cautious.
Yep. I had a conversation recently with one of my mentors, and we were going over a scenario, and he said something like so perfectly, and I was trying to reiterate it to practice. And it was like, listen, I don't want you to be a parrot and just say what I say, okay? I want you to be you. You're this, you're that, you're the other. You can articulate yourself well. I want you to just say it how you would say it. And I was so frustrated in that moment, even though it was great feedback. It's not that it wasn't. It's because you have this frustration of almost wanting to emulate someone who you think does things so well. And then you lose yourself in the translation. And I just had to collect myself, kind of chew the meat, spit out the bones of it. And by the time I was able to actually go over the scenario live, taking from our conversation, it came out authentically and it felt better. I was more frustrated in the conversation because I was just trying to kind of spit it back. But from an authenticity standpoint, it's so important that you just take what you can, let it nurture you to the extent it should, but then that just is feeding into the soil that you already have as far as who you are. And that's where the self-work is super important, of just knowing who you are, how you communicate your style, and it just lends itself ultimately.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I mean, at 44, right? Like that knowledge that I finally know, like I know myself, but I'm always still learning little things that, is important. It's important to have that personal growth and looking at yourself and knowing where can I be authentic and myself and not so cautious with my language. And, I think that's, let's see, we've got some more comments. I had a high expectation for the session today, and you both very engaged attendees have surpassed it. Oh, that's so nice. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
Yes, why do I have to be so careful? Might be the wrong place. Yeah. And I've felt that, where I know I'm walking on eggshells with my communication. And it's not because I don't care about the other person. It's that their perception is always one way. And so where am I overcompensating for perceptions?
That's well said.
Yeah. So that overcompensating for the perceptions of others because they have these labels. And what can you do about that? Be clear, concise about your language, but also determine what you're going to take and what you're not going to take on. I think
it
is the key. And, doing self-analysis and knowing yourself and knowing your values, I think is also another really important piece. We're already over time. Do you have any other suggestions for people who are looking at this? We've got that, don't take that on, but also that self-analysis. Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say, ultimately, if you are in the scenario and this comes up as far as labels being put on, I would say first consider the source it's coming from, because that's one thing. Secondly, you can also look at, hey, what might be the intent behind that? And might this be more of a personal issue than an actual founded issue? And thirdly, root yourself in who you are. Just know that you are authentically you. You bring a unique perspective to your team. You are successful in what you do and will continue to be. But if there's feedback to be open to it.
Yeah. And do the next best right thing.
I think. And don't take it on.
Do the next best right thing for you, but also, do it with a loving, open heart that, you care about those around you and that, I've seen the aggressive, right? And what does that look like? Well, it's the lack of care for other people, the lack of the outcome on the other side. So as long as you're genuinely caring about other people, you're really not in that bucket. And so take what you will from it. So I really hope this was useful to everyone. On Friday, I am talking about mental health at noon with Johnny Crusher from Cope Notes. And that's going to be a fantastic session. I'm really excited about that. And then next week, I've got Christina Finseth. And, she's going to bring some wisdom on outreach and cracking the code of outreach, but doing it together with a team, not just you, but like doing it in a team setting, all on the same ship together to reach your goals. So thank you so much, Guerlyne, for joining me. I'm so grateful that you decided to join.
Yes,
And
thank you so much for having me, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I hope this was useful.